Hey, so I'm a huge fan of the Uncharted series. Anybody who knows me knows that I am a gigantic fan of the video games. They are my favorite video games. And so, the movie came out a couple of days ago. I've had a couple of days. I watched it. I went to see it against my better judgment. I went to see it. I've had a couple of days now to collect my thoughts, and I kind of wanted to just kind of throw them out there. This is not scripted. This is just me kind of rambling, which is why there'll be a lot of cuts. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I will very likely publish an actual kind of cohesive, like straight up review of the film. So if you just want that, you can just look for it, probably about 2 minutes long or whatever. It's right there. This is going to be a slightly longer video, I'm sure, because it's kind of talking about the experience as a whole and what I think of the movie in kind of general terms. But more than a review of the movie, this is more meant to be just a stream of consciousness, me meditating on what this is, the impact it had on me as a fan, and what this all means as a fan, what I think of Uncharted as a series, what I think of the project, like what I think about basically the mistakes that were made from the very beginning up until now to result in this movie that came out, which is not a great movie. Okay, it's frankly kind of a mediocre movie, let's be honest. But I don't want to, I'm not going to go too much into that. I'm also not going to do too much in terms of the movie. I'm not going to really do any spoilers, so don't worry about that. I'm just going to be talking about my general impressions of the series and all that stuff. So basically, as I was saying at the beginning, I am a huge fan of the series. And yeah, like one of the criticisms, because it's a highly acclaimed video game series. Okay, I'm not alone in my fandom. So this does not make me unique. A lot of people like it, and it's been highly acclaimed. So I'm not going to even tell you it's an underrated video game series, whatever. Not. It's none of those things. One of the criticisms that's often leveled at the series is basically that a lack of replay value, right? Which, I can see where they're coming from. The games are pretty straightforward, and once you've played through them and beat them, there's little there for you to go back to in terms of gameplay, in terms of there aren't a lot of things. It's not an open world game like GTA where there's tons of stuff to collect and look around and explore and whatever. They're pretty straightforward narrative experiences that you just go through it and you finish it, and that's the end. One of the criticisms that's been leveled is a lack of replay value. Well, and I don't really agree. Like for me, that's not. I have not found that to be the case. I have often replayed them, and for me, I've often replayed them simply for the pleasure of going back into that world, getting engaged with those characters, those adventures. I've replayed the Uncharted games in much the same way that I would revisit a film that I like or reread a book, whatever it is. I do that with certain things. So I look at it kind of on that level. I've enjoyed them on that level. I'm sure that doesn't make me unique either. I'm sure other people have too. Because one of the things about Uncharted that makes them unique is that they're very well done games where they've really paid a lot of attention to like the characters and really tried to create a kind of a very engaging cinematic world that you could really tear into. But basically, the reason that I love Uncharted so much and what impacted me about it, because it's this game series has been going on, we're about over 15 years at this point. The first game was released in 2007. I did not play it in 2007 when it first came out. I think I played it in like 2008, like a year later, the year after it actually came out. So one of the things that I really liked about this, why I was impressed, it was because up until this point, there had already been attempts to bring a cinematic component into video games. So that doesn't really make Uncharted unique at all. Going as far back, I remember the very first time that I was, let's say, impressed by this. You go all the way back to like Resident Evil. When Resident Evil first came out in like the mid-90s, whenever that was, 95, I think. So when the first Resident Evil came out, one thing that was interesting about it is that it had this sort of detailed story. It wasn't just, they were taking advantage of the CD-ROM technology, right? So it was a little bit more elaborate. It was longer than a regular game could be. But also it kind of had like a storyline, that you were supposed to get sort of involved in. It had characters with voice acting, and so I appreciated that they were trying to do sort of a, you know, to give that sort of richness to a video game. That you were supposed to get involved in the storyline as well as the gameplay aspects of the reason you would play the game. But obviously, you look at Resident Evil, certainly the very first one that came out. You look at that game, and yeah, I mean, let's be fair. The attempt to do it is certainly admirable. The fact that it has all these details and it's an interesting story and whatever else, and that you can kind of get into on some level is fine. But the actual script, the actual dialogues are inane. The voice acting is, of course, atrocious. It's not something you can't compare it to a movie. You're like, yeah, I mean, they're trying to make this as cinematic as possible so you can have an involving story, and from that point on, games started to do that, but they very rarely could compare to movies. They very rarely could, you couldn't really look at this and go like, well, this is just as good as a movie. I had just as involving an experience as when I watched a movie, and that you couldn't really say that. But you could certainly appreciate what they were trying to do. And, and then it follows that you say to yourself, somebody could actually make a pretty good movie out of this. Because, like, all the elements are there. The storyline, the characters, the basic idea, it's all there. You just need to kind of take this and, spice it up a bit, polish it, write a good script, get good actors, and sort of reinterpret it as a movie. But it works. Like, all the elements are there. Which is why they have tried. And they have failed. But I'll get into that in a bit. Maybe not even in this video. But in any case, what impressed me about Uncharted was that here was a game, finally, that could compare to a movie. Simple. Ultimately, the level of detail that Naughty Dog, the developers at Naughty Dog, had put into it was comparable to something that you'd get out of a summer blockbuster movie. And this was very deliberate. That was the whole intention. That was what they were trying to do with the game. They said, let's bring the experience of a summer blockbuster action film into a video game. So basically what it is, it becomes this interactive summer blockbuster popcorn movie. Okay, and that to me was, I was impressed because it really is the first time that I can remember where I really felt that when I played Uncharted, because they've, in difference to how games were being done up until that point, where they develop the game, they'd be doing the graphics and whatever, and they would hire voice actors to come in and do their voices and whatever. But this was done differently. This was, they actually, they thought about the story, tried to craft a storyline that was comparable to a summer blockbuster movie, and on top of that tried to write a script that had the sort of witty dialogue and interactions that you expect in movies like that, and create characters that you could potentially see in a movie like that, and hire really good actors to come in and play those characters. And they come in and they actually wear mocap suits, and they did it on a mocap stage. So all the cutscenes that you see in the Uncharted games, they've been shot. They've been, performed by actors. It's not just a voice. They've actually performed the scenes, and then obviously the animators come in and make it look great. But the point is that they've thought about it to that level, where like they actually shot it as if it were a movie, and then and got the actors to perform as if they were acting in a movie, and I mean, they even encouraging them to improv and do things like that, which wouldn't matter, and then they could later just animate around it. So that's why it has this sort of polish to it, where you look at the cutscenes and they look, I mean, it's animated obviously, but because of the technology of the time, it was already the PlayStation 3, so the graphics are of course a lot better, and it still looks like a cartoon, sure, but like a very good one. Like they were already we were already getting past that uncanny valley thing where, the graphics certainly don't look like real people, but they're already putting enough detail that you can see emotion on their faces and so on and so forth. So, playing through Uncharted, so you have the cutscenes, which were mocapped, and then, like, during the game itself, you also hear dialogue, because like the characters are talking to each other as they're exploring an area or getting involved in a shootout or whatever it is. So when you're playing Uncharted, you feel like you're playing a movie. That's really what it feels like. And I was just really impressed with that. Now, I'll be honest. I mean, you look at this, and yeah, it's no great shakes in the story department. You know, they are very consciously and deliberately riffing on like Indiana Jones. It's basically a combination of Indiana Jones and Romancing the Stone, is what it is. Because there's, the character of Nathan Drake he's not an academic like Indiana Jones. He's kind of just a scoundrel, just a treasure hunter. You know. Soldier of fortune, if you will, kind of like Michael Douglas's character in *Romancing the Stone*. What was it? Jack Colton, I think. So it's a little bit of that, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and so obviously it's not something you've never seen before. When you're playing that, you're saying, yeah, this is obviously they're trying to do like an Indiana Jones kind of thing, and that had already been done in video game form. I mean, that's Tomb Raider, So basically, not only is it derivative of Indiana Jones, as a game, it's derivative of Tomb Raider. Because it's basically the same principle, except it's a guy, but you're still exploring these locations, looking for treasure, fighting bad guys, whatever. So there's nothing particularly original about the game itself. So I want to make that clear. If the game hadn't had the polish that it has, now I'm not saying it wouldn't have been a good game. It probably still would have been a fun game to play. But what drew me to it wasn't the specifics of the fact that it was an Indiana Jones type of thing. I'm a huge fan of Indiana Jones, so obviously that does appeal to me, but that's not the reason. That's all good, but it was because of the polish they put into the presentation to really try to make it feel like you were playing through a movie. And so once again, as I played that, and this is different from how it was with Resident Evil, now as I played it, I feel like I'm playing a movie. I really feel like I'm playing a movie. I actually do. And I've said this many times. I think, because the whole Uncharted series is like that. All the games in the series have that polish, and in fact, they get better and better as they go along, because obviously they ironed out the kinks and really, really started to up their game in terms of the presentation and the cinematic aspects of it. So they just get better and better. And my feeling has been, and still is, and I felt it when I played them, and I still feel it now. Any of the Uncharted games, certainly between 2 and 5, right? Like maybe the first one not so much, but between 2 and 5, any of them are superior to the last Indiana Jones movie, the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Superior. They're superior. Now I know maybe some would say, well, that's not exactly a high bar to clear, and you're probably right. But my point is, yeah, not only are they better than that. I mean, I remember like Uncharted 4 came out in 2015, and I thought at that time, in 2015, in the summer of 2015, when I played Uncharted 4, it was comparable to and superior to any of the summer action blockbusters that came out that summer. Like that, it was better than any of them. Like I believed that then, and I believe it now. I believe that Uncharted 4 was one of the best action films of 2015. I still think that, even though it wasn't a movie. It was just this thing that I sat down and played for 10 hours or however long it takes. But my point is, the difference is that now when I'm sitting there playing Uncharted, it's not like when I was playing Resident Evil where I say to myself, well, this actually has all the elements you need to be a movie. Obviously, you need to take these characters, you need to take this storyline, and you need to write a good script, and then get a good cast to do it. In the case of Uncharted, that becomes a little bit different. It's more like, this is pretty much a movie that I'm playing here. Obviously, somebody who's not a gamer, unfortunately, is going to miss out on this because, this can only be enjoyed by a gamer, somebody who plays video games. But if this were a movie, I mean, it's got everything already there. The script is already good enough to be a summer blockbuster action movie. I'm not saying it's a comparable. I'm not saying that Robert Towne wrote the script for Uncharted. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's a comparable. It's an acceptable action movie, comic book movie, popcorn movie script. It has a fairly engaging storyline for an adventure picture. It has good characters, good dialogues. So it's already there. It's all fine. And on top of that, because of the polish they put into it, even the visuals are there. It's a visually engaging thing where you look at it and it looks cinematic, it looks like a movie. So it's like, it's already there. I mean, all people would have to do is just take this and basically do what would be the equivalent of doing a remake, is essentially what it would be. So basically, it was easy. It was a cakewalk. It was a layup, as they say. Okay. So I've been following the development process of the Uncharted movie since it began, and this thing has been in development for about a decade, maybe even a little more than that. Initially, it was going to be David O. Russell, who just come off. I think he had just done The Fighter, which featured Mark Wahlberg. So clearly, he was going to come into this, and he thought, okay, Mark Wahlberg as Nathan Drake, Mark Wahlberg. And I remember thinking, no, come on, no. I nothing against the guy. He's a perfectly good actor in the right role. But I didn't feel that this was the right role for him. But whatever, David O. Russell, Mark Wahlberg, I think they were going to get like Robert De Niro. And I think the intention at the time was to make an adaptation of Drake's Fortune. It was to do this, just make it into a movie, which I felt, well, I mean, if you're going to do it, that's what you should do. But whatever. I didn't love the casting, but I was willing, given the people involved, I was saying, well, these are talented people. Maybe they'll make a good movie. But the thing was stuck in development hell for many years. So, for David O. Russell eventually walked, and then I think, like Sean Levy came in, Joe Carnahan came in, then Sean Levy came in. Like at one point, it wasn't going to be Mark Wahlberg anymore. I think at one point they were thinking Chris Pratt, and okay, better idea, better choice. Somebody that I feel could maybe be closer to the way he is in the game. Because that's one of the problems. One of the problems is that the people who are in the game, the actors they got to play these characters in the game, are already so good, and you've come to identify the characters through the way they've been portrayed by these good actors, that anybody else coming into it will have their work cut out for them. But that's only from the perspective of a fan, okay? Somebody who's never played the games, doesn't know anything about them, isn't going to have that problem. But they do, at the very least, you got to give them a good action movie that they can enjoy with a good cast and whatever. And that's why I go like, okay, fine. At the end of the day, if it is Mark Wahlberg, as long as they've made the movie well, as long as it's good, I guess you can keep an open mind. And so when I went to the new movie, which is what we ended up with eventually, after it wasn't going to be Chris Pratt anymore, eventually when they finally said, okay, let's make it, by that time Tom Holland had already been cast as Spider-Man, which was a Sony movie. And so Tom Rothman, was saying, hey, this kid, he's going to be a hot item now because, he's the new Spider-Man. So how about if we make him Nathan? This was thought, back whenever the first Spider-Man movie came out. That's when that development began. And Tom Holland, I don't know how old he is. I think he's like 25 or something, like in reality. Which, sure, I mean, in the first game, the implication is that Nathan Drake is in like his late 20s, maybe 30 tops. So age-wise, he's fine, but come on, he certainly doesn't look like he's 25. Okay, let's be honest. And then they said, and I think they said, well, yeah, we'll make it, Tom Holland, and because the idea is for this to be a prequel. This is going to be a prequel to the games. And you go, okay, I guess, because I understand the logic, by the way, of like saying let's cast him young, so it gives us room to grow. Because I get it, if your idea is to start a movie franchise, then yes, you're going to want your hero to not be too old, too long in the tooth, because your hope is to make 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 of these things at the very least. So if you start with somebody who's already in their 30s, by the time you get to number 4, that person will be in their 50s, and maybe that's not what you want. You kind of want room for growth that's more organic and gives you more possibility. Now, having said that, we're going to be getting a new Indiana Jones movie next year, and by the time it comes out, Harrison Ford is going to be 80 years old. Then I saw the trailer, and I was like, oh no, because based on the trailer, and I'm going to assume that most people who are watching this are familiar with the games. I'm not going to go into spoiler territory or anything like that, but at the same time, and I know some people are not, so that's why I'm trying to just sort of, these thoughts, again, it's me thinking out loud. But basically, if you're familiar with the games, you'll know this. But essentially, but when I looked at the trailer, that trailer, I mean, I immediately saw, well, this isn't a prequel. Whatever this is, it's not a prequel, because it's, you clearly see set pieces from the games, and not just from the first one, because it'd be one thing if all you saw was stuff from the first one. Like, if I had seen the trailer and saw tons of set pieces from the first game, or visuals that evoked the first game, and the storyline was very clearly the first game, then I would have thought to myself, oh, okay, they adapted Drake's Fortune, except they give it they made a few adjustments so that it's an origin story, and you know what? I would have been fine with that. Like, that would have been okay. But my point is, that's not what they did. They basically grabbed set pieces from all the games, set pieces and visuals and concepts and ideas from all games, at least the first, at least all 4 games, the 4 main games in the series. And I thought, and I'm go that, you have, like, if you watch the trailer, you see that, you've got that thing on an airplane with the, a cargo plane. That's an action set piece. That's from Uncharted 3. You've got, pirate ships and an auction house with a cross and all that. That's from 4. Chloe the character of Chloe is clearly in there to be the female lead, and she was introduced in Uncharted 2. So, I mean, I was like, I look at that and I go, why? That was, to me, that was just it seemed to me, why'd they choose to do this? And what it basically tells me when I see that, and then when I subsequently saw the movie, and essentially, yes, I mean, you can look at it as a prequel if you're not a fan, but then it's not even a prequel, because you can't have a prequel to something that doesn't exist, and there is no Uncharted film series, so it's not a prequel. It's not a prequel to anything. It's just a movie, which is its own thing. And again, and so once I got over my initial I did go into the movie with an open enough mind to try to accept it on its own terms as an adventure movie. And yeah, the movie's fine, I guess. And like I said, I'm going to publish a more cohesive review that just goes into the movie itself. And I'll post a link to that here. But my problem with it, my problem with the way they've approached Uncharted to turn it into a movie is the same problem I basically have with video game adaptations as a whole. And this is going to sound very weird, but video games don't get any respect. And that's going to be weird. That sounds weird. But there just is a very big difference, okay, between like adapting something like Super Mario Brothers or Sonic the Hedgehog. And when I say that, I'm referring to the original incarnations of these games. Okay, Super Mario Brothers for the Nintendo came out in like 1985. Obviously, you look at that little character jumping around, hitting boxes, whatever. And although there is a story, it's not really a story, it's more of a premise. It's this plumber who enters this world and has to rescue a princess and whatever. That's the premise. It's not really a story, because there's no story, there's no character development, there's no, you have a premise, which if you want to make a movie out of that, you would have to invent a story. You'd have to come up with, how do I take this premise and expand it into an actual story, and include characters and develop the characters and so on. And the same with like the original incarnation of Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Genesis. Again, you have a premise. You have this little blue hedgehog that runs very fast and lives in this nice world, and all his friends have been captured by the evil Dr. Robotnik, and he has to like rescue them and stop the evil Dr. Robotnik from enslaving his friends. And again, that's a premise. Okay, no character development, no actual story, nothing like that. So again, you have to take that and figure out how to transfer this. And like, I actually haven't seen the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, but a lot of people have told me it's very good, or at least worth watching. And I'm sure that it is. So that's not what I'm getting at. But in general, okay, when people approach a video game property, and whether it was Mario Brothers back when they did that, or eventually they did Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, they don't come at it. They just come at it in the sense of exploiting a property, exploiting an IP, okay, and figuring out how to make this a movie that is commercially successful so they can make tons of money. And that's all they're thinking about. They're not thinking about the story or the characters or anything like that. And in an old video game, that's understandable, because like I said, there's no story there. There's nothing there. So all you have are a bunch of characters and a bunch of ideas, and okay, let's exploit this and Let's make a movie and let's do the best job we can to make a coherent movie. And sometimes they place some attention on that and it works, and sometimes they don't care and they just end up with a piece of shit movie. But now modern games aren't like that anymore. It would be one thing if Uncharted, if the game were a 16-bit 2D thing where it's like this little sprite jumping up and down on platforms and picking up treasures and fighting bad guys. And yes, there is a kind of storyline that sort of plays out, but again, you would need to develop that, right? But Uncharted isn't that. Uncharted is already has all those elements. It already is a story. However basic and simple an adventure story it may be, it is still a storyline. It's an action movie, essentially an interactive action movie that you play through. So it already has the storyline fleshed out. It already has the characters, the heroes, the villains. It already has relationships, the character development. It already has all of that. So all you need to do is transfer it. And they're still coming at it like if it's an IP they need to exploit. That's it. To date, and I'm pretty sure it's not the case here, just as it hasn't been the case in the recent past either. I don't think, during the development process this might have happened, but by the time they actually made the movie, I can tell you, based on having seen the movie and everything, that it's not what happened. But basically the way it could have been and should have been is that some filmmaker, whether it's David O. Russell or Joe Carnahan or even Ruben Fleischer, okay, whoever was going to make the movie, but what it should have been is somebody takes this, goes like, I love this, I love this, I love this story, I love these characters, I love this world, this is what I want to make this movie, I want to put this up on the screen. The same way you would do with like a novel, okay, where maybe you don't love it, maybe you don't, but something about it appeals to you, and you go like, this is interesting, this grabs my attention, or simply I'm very passionate about this novel, about this book, and I want to make a movie based on this book, and I'm going to do well, we are going to do our best to take this book and adapt it for the screen and put that world up there on the screen, and come and and here we go, and so. Like even Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, okay? It's very different from the novel of The Shining. He clearly, when he read that book, a lot of things appealed to him about the basic premise of the book, the characters, what's going on. He realized he could use that to tell a compelling story that he wanted to tell. But that's my point. He wanted to tell that story. And if you watch the movie of The Shining, although there are many differences between the movie and the book, many changes in the adaptation, which were done for many reasons, okay? Whether it's budget considerations or simply because, those particular elements just didn't interest the filmmaker. But you look at the movie of The Shining, and even though it's different, it's still recognizably The Shining. It's still recognizably what that book is. It has the same basic plot, the characters. It's the same story, because ultimately, if you're not going to tell that story, then don't bother adapting that thing. Do something else, right? So that's what I mean. These new games have to be approached the same way. Somebody has to come at them with that desire to let's put this up there on the screen. And it's so easy because they are already so cinematic that you really just have to, cherry pick the visual elements and all the things and almost use them as pre-visualizations, like storyboards. Like you already have it. You have the screenplay, you have the storyboard. And somebody might argue, well, but that's what they did, right? And I go, no, it's not what they did, because what they did is essentially they just said, okay, let's write an adventure movie script, okay, and then let's stick in elements from the 4 games. And okay, the movie itself, when you sit down and you watch it, it is, you look at what's going on in the movie, the storyline and what's happening, and you go this could be an Uncharted game. It could be. The storyline, since it borrows elements from all 4 games, of course, it is a storyline that could be in an Uncharted game. The villain, the things, even the set pieces. Okay, some of them are, in fact, in an Uncharted game, and one of them, the best one in the movie, actually, which is the climax, is not from any of the games, but it could be. It could have been, because it is a pretty wild, cool action sequence that I thought to myself, this would have been a cool thing to play, And so my point is, it had that. Now, if I think they had two ways to go. They claim it's a prequel. So then invent a story that could conceivably be an Uncharted game, but completely invent it, and then that way there's nothing there from the games except the character, obviously. But since this is supposed to be a prequel, then it's fine. And then they could have done that, and it would have probably been fine. A fan like me who might not like that they didn't adapt Drake's Fortune would still look at that and go, okay, I see what they did here. They did like a prequel. Okay, that's good. Like almost like that and go, okay, so from here, presumably what would come next is Drake's Fortune and Among Thieves and all the other games. So that would have been fine. But they didn't do that, right? So that was one way to go, okay? Or what I thought they were going to do, based on what I heard, which is to, okay, it's a prequel, but let's just grab this, okay, and make a few changes. And what are the changes? Well, first of all, Tom Holland, even if he is 25, he looks like he's 15. So yeah, you're talking about Drake being much younger in the film than he is in the games. And we've cast Mark Wahlberg as Sully, probably because we've still got this guy on contract for the past 10 years. He was supposed to be in the movie. He was supposed to be Drake. Fuck it. He's not going to be Drake anymore, but let's make him Sully. Not good casting, okay? He just is not good casting in terms of representing the character as he is in the game. Not even close. But I would accept that. I'd be like, okay, fine, whatever. He doesn't have to be identical to the way he is in the game, as long as, okay, so that's Sully now. Okay, fine. And then, all right, and this is going to be a little controversial, but it's just a fact. You've got Tom Holland, you've got Mark Wahlberg. They are your leads. They are two Caucasians for a mainstream movie, Hollywood movie, in 2022. Two Caucasians is more than enough. So I get it. I get why the female lead is not, Elena Fisher. I get why it's not her. Because, as I just said, you've already got two. Enough. Let's bring some diversity into this thing. Fine. That's how they operate. That's fine. I don't mind that. And I like that they changed the female lead from Elena to Chloe. Because Chloe, first of all, is a great character. She's wonderful. And she is from the games. They didn't feel the need to invent anything, okay? And they just, they brought in a character who's from the games, and in fact has a history with Nathan Drake that we don't see. Okay, that's fine. So we just switch out the female lead. Instead of Elena, now it's Chloe. But you still kind of follow the parameters of the original storyline of Drake's Fortune, which is the search for El Dorado. That's what that is. And then, you cast Antonio Banderas as the villain. Great casting. He's a great actor, okay? And he's going to bring he brings tremendous value to the movie because of who he is. And in fact, Drake's Fortune, the villain, ultimately is a Hispanic man named Navarro. He's the villain of the movie. He's the villain of the story. Antonio Banderas is a fantastic actor. He could totally play that character. So there you go. And you just make that story. You just adapt that. Why don't they do that? Why don't they do that? It's... People will say they don't do that because the gamers don't want to just see the same thing that they already played. It'll be boring for them. And I'm going, no, it won't be. That's the whole point. That's like saying, well, why did you take that book? Why did you take The Shining and set it on a space station? And, why did you do that? And you're like, well, because the person who read The Shining is going to be bored if it's a hotel and with ghosts. So we said, why not make it futuristic and make it take place on a space station? That's the whole point. If you're adapting a property, it's because that property interested you, and those elements are what interested you. And that's what you want to put up there on the screen. And so as a fan, like I said, I played through Uncharted, and I've done it multiple times, because I love those characters, I love that world, and I love those stories. And I would love to be able to share those stories with Like, I'd love my dad, for instance, to like be able to enjoy Uncharted, but I know that I'm not going to make my dad sit down and play Uncharted. He's not going to do it. Okay, and he's also not going to sit down and watch me play for 8 hours. He's not going to do that either. So, okay, at least he would have an opportunity if they made a really good movie version of it. You know what? This is that game I like so much. Why don't you check it out as a movie? You know, just sit down for 2 hours and watch a movie version of it, and hopefully you'll enjoy it just as much as I do. Maybe you'll even get why I like it so much. And the sad thing is that, yes, most people probably, because, you know, I mean, I showed my dad the trailer for the Uncharted movie. And his reaction was, of course, yeah, that looks fun. That looks like a fun, like Indiana Jones type of movie. Because sure, if you don't know anything about the games, you watch that trailer and you see a trailer for a, you know, a decent looking adventure movie, which ultimately that is what the movie is. Okay? It's a perfectly solid programmer. It's kind of bland, but there's nothing wrong with the movie's fine. Okay? As a movie. It kind of fulfills the requirements of being a popcorn movie that you can watch for 2 hours and just have a good time. As long as you don't have any, you know, expectations based on the fact that you're a fan or whatever, you should be fine. But I know that it could have been better because I've played the games. Any of the games. Just like I said before, how and like most of the Uncharted games are better than the last Indiana Jones movies. And the last Indiana Jones movie, and all, you know, number 4 was the best action movie of 2015, in my opinion, and better than any of the summer blockbusters that came out that year. Well, so if they had just taken Drake's Fortune and made that a movie, it probably would have been better than what we got. Or maybe not. Okay, there is a chance, because, like, as I said, there's no great shakes in the story department. Yes, the characters are great, but the characters are only going to be as good as the actors who play them, and, you know, how they are interpreted. And if the chemistry is there, then that should come forth, but maybe it won't be. There's a very good chance that if they had taken Drake's Fortune, as I've been describing, and just simply, you know, adapted it, even with the changes that they made, like I was saying, would we have gotten a better movie than what we got? I'll be honest, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe in terms of the quality of the movie, you know, the how good it is when stacked up against other adventure films, other films of that genre. How does it compare? There's every reason to believe that probably we would have gotten yet another kind of middle of the road movie, which would have been fine, perfectly watchable. However, at least, it would have shown that they had an actual passion or interest in the property, in the material, beyond just wanting to exploit the property. At least it would have shown that. And at least, as a fan, I could have at least sat down and said, okay, that was fun, that was good, I can recommend this. I can actually be like, hey, Dad or whoever, watch this, because this is it. This is pretty much, this is what it is. You know, I would have been able to say that. Now I can't really say that. Now it's more like, yeah, watch it if you want to watch it. It's fine. It's not a bad movie. It's fun. But it isn't the game. I still would say 100 times, if you can play the game, play the game. And, yeah, don't bother with the movie. Yeah, I hope you liked this video. And if you did, please give me a like and subscribe to my channel and share the video. There's going to be some cool stuff coming to the channel, so you're going to want to keep track of it, and I hope you like all that stuff too. See ya.